Welcome to this week's episode where I'm going to discuss software and the amount of it that we have and the amount of it that we don't need. So, you're a record producer, you're a bedroom producer, whatever you are, whatever level you're at, you're always going to be overwhelmed and bombarded with a lot of software. It's just the way it is these days. Now, I'm going to take you back a couple of decades to when I first started making music, which was around 93. But I got my first computer in 95, which was an Atari ST. And with that, I had to buy an Akai sampler as well. That cost me like £500 at the time. And then on top of that, a MIDI controller. And I also built it up over time. And I bought myself a small drum machine, which was a Yamaha one. And I also bought a Roland D5 keyboard, a MIDI keyboard, because it had a bank of sounds on, obviously. But the majority of what I did back then was sample based. It was looping and filtering and, cutting up old disco records and things like that. Sometimes I produce hip hop beats and things just for, experimentation and things like that. But on the surface, it was mostly, disco, funky house, etc. So I had literally one keyboard where I would probably use it for a bass line. It would be a MIDI preset, as I say, within the Roland. And obviously everything else I did was sample based. So it'd be vocals from acapellas, things like that. So I had very little. I had next to nothing. And yet I had all my records to sample from. So I used what I could around me. I used all the tools around me that were available to me. And basically that problem now does not exist anymore because we're completely overwhelmed with so many different plugins. I mean, the majority of us, let's face it, use plugins now. Of course, I've still got hardware, as you can see behind me, but that's just for live jamming. That's just for fun. I don't really use those things in my productions. But when we're producing, it's so convenient now to just go, all right, I want a Rhodes keyboard. Let's get a Rhodes keyboard up. And then you get the Rhodes keyboard up and you've got 25, 30 presets of different styles, 70s one or an 80s one or whatever. And you're like, oh, it's just too much. You think to yourself, it's just too much. So you end up getting bogged down with small pockets of distraction because you want a Rhodes keyboard, but you're unsure of which one to use. Which one? Shall I use that one with a vibrato? Shall I use the one without? Shall I put a flanger and a phaser on it? You're so overwhelmed with stuff. It can hold you back. So the important thing here to talk about today is the fact that we perhaps should just draw the brakes a little bit on your tracks. If you're making a track and you want to make a soulful house record, which requires a synth bass or a live bass, Rhodes, piano, strings, all these elements, and just choose the first one or two that you use initially, rather than go through 20 different cellos or 20 different live bass instruments on your Native Instruments plugin or whatever you might use. Some of you might even play bass and play it live in and that's your bass. But the majority of us, obviously, we're not, multi-instrumentalists. We tend to just play on the keyboard and samples and stuff. So, yeah, making music now, you don't realize how long it can take you to make a track. When you make a good track and you're on a roll, a good track will come out within an hour. There's no doubt about it. And you're on a roll and you've mashed it and you've laid it out. Whereas other days, you probably spend an hour or two, going through stuff, coming up with ideas, playing a few chords in, and then you try a sample and then you try this. And it just doesn't work. And that's just the way it goes sometimes. So the best thing there is just to walk away. But when you're on a roll or you're doing okay and you're happy spending an hour or two coming up with some jams, but then you find yourself going through 20 pianos or you find yourself going through 6 different lead lines and stuff, it's because you're overwhelmed with the amount of stuff available. I've got, I don't know how many plugins I've got, third-party synths. I've probably got 50 to 60 probably. I don't download a lot, and the ones that I'm keen on I use quite regularly. I've tried to minimize it all now. And then I download some that are free, go, I'll try that out, I'll give that a go. And then I'll probably find 1 or 2 sounds on there that I like that I can twist about, but I'll never use it again. But I just don't uninstall it. Because I think, well, just hang on to it. And you end up becoming a digital hoarder. Because it's the same with sample packs. I keep things that I don't even use. I'll download a sample pack that's got 20 bass sounds on it or something, and I can put them into a sampler and play about with them, and then I'll use one of them maybe, and then I don't remove it from the pack and then delete the rest. I just keep them all in a file on my screen. And it's like, again, you're bogged down with stuff. You've got far too much stuff. You've got, how many kick drums do we need? How many snare drums do we need? And I've probably got over 1,000. I don't even know why I don't just pick 10 core kick drums, 10 core snares, and delete the rest. But back to software, that's that's the thing that we're talking about, is where it holds you back because you're unsure of which pad to use. Back in the day when I was making tracks and I was starting and doing that, I would knock up a track a day without a doubt. It would be brilliant and it would be rough and it would be sketchy and demo-y, but I would still knock up a track because I only had a small amount of limitation that I could apply to the track. I didn't have 5 synths, I didn't have 3 drum machines and 1,000 drum kick samples pack. They didn't exist really around then. You had to create your own samples and buy keyboards, so to speak. So the point of this is, when you're producing your music, what you need to try and do is just try and minimalize everything you've done, everything that you're doing. So don't have 10 different options for a Rhodes keyboard. Don't have 20 different cello strings. Don't have 8 different pianos. Pick one that you generally use and just stick with it and just mold that into your track and just get on to the next part. So then go on to your bass. Once you've got your chords down on your keyboard or your Rhodes, then get your bass up. Just find that first bass pattern that you like, the bass sound that you like, get the pattern in, move on to the next. Don't waste your time going through 50 different lead lines and so on and then go, I don't like that synth, I'll get rid of it, I'll try a different synth, I'll get this up, I'll get that up. And then you've been through probably 5 or 10 different VST synths and you're still not happy and you end up stuck in the loop, and then you get disheartened and then you break and you stop and you go, oh, forget it, and you go off and do something else. When you want to create the music but you're just stuck in that rut, where you're looking for that special sound, you're looking for the perfect snare drum or whatever, and it's just not going to come because you're searching too hard. You're overthinking it, and you think, right, I've got 10 synths here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this and that, and it ends up coming to nothing. So try and strip back everything you do. Pick 2 or 3 core VST plugins that you use and just stick with them. And if you use Serum, for example, or you use the Korg M1, they have got hundreds and hundreds of sounds in, I get it. But just try to avoid getting sucked into the hole of spending too long on a certain synth pad. Withdraw from, trying to go through 10 snare packs. Just get the one snare that you like and just roll with it. Even if it isn't accurate, even if it isn't right, but it's okay. Keep rolling and produce the track. Push the track out. Get the track arranged and done. And then if you've got a spare half an hour next week, then go back to that snare and focus on that snare. But don't spend the time looking for a snare when you could be recording the bass and the guitars or whatever, you need to push forward with the arrangement. That's the important thing. So overwhelmed synthesizers, overwhelmed, VST plugins, and it doesn't just apply to synths, it applies to effects plugins, tremolos and chorus delay plugins and phaser and flanger plugins and all these crazy things that people come up with now where they make the sound go off into a whole different realm. Just trying to avoid falling into that trap of doing that. We have far too much stuff available to us, and that's the problem. And it's just like social media. You scroll and you scroll and you scroll and you don't actually watch anything. You don't get stuck into anything because you're just going on to the next. So yeah, that really is the message today, is to try and help you think, right, next time I make a track, I'm going to just push forward, get the arrangement done, use as basic sounds, get them right, and then focus on coming back to it and changing certain sounds little by little. And then because the track is complete, if your track is complete, then you can come back to it a day or two later and focus on getting the right road sound or whatever you're doing. I think that's the important thing. And then you'll find yourself being way more productive and getting your stuff out there more regularly, because you would have stopped wasting so much time, and then you wouldn't have got disheartened by the lack of progress that you're making. So yeah, the rule of this really is to not overwhelm yourself with all of the plugins you've got, and just focus on 1 or 2, and don't spend too much time dwelling on this sound or that sound. Keep it very simple, push the track out, then go back to it. So that's it really. That's my short little message for you today, a bit of inspiration for you today to give you some guidance on getting your music ready and getting it out there, and then focusing on the technicals, more detailed stuff later on. I hope you've enjoyed that. Thanks for watching, guys, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already to this podcast. Take care, and I'll see you next time.